I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would own a mountain. In fact, 10 years ago, I was barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck and dreaming of something quiet, peaceful, and far away from the noise of the world. All I ever wanted was a small cabin, somewhere in the woods, where no one would bother me, and where I could breathe fresh air without hearing traffic or people arguing over nonsense. So when I found that old listing for an abandoned hunting cabin deep in the Rockies, I didn't even hesitate. I packed everything I had into my beat-up pickup truck and drove across 3 states with just a map, some canned food, and my dog, Jasper. The cabin was in rough shape when I got there. Half the windows were broken, there was no power, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But to me, it was perfect. I spent the next few months fixing it up little by little, cutting wood from fallen trees, sealing the roof with tar and scrap metal, and building furniture from whatever I could find nearby. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had solitude, the stars, and the kind of quiet you only hear when nature is listening. That first winter was hard. The snow piled up so high, I had to shovel my way out just to reach the firewood. Some nights, it felt like the cold would creep into my bones and never leave. But every morning, I wake up, make strong coffee, and look out over the valley below. I could see for miles, just endless forests and mountains rolling into each other like waves. No roads, no towns, just wild beauty. A few years passed like that. I'd make the occasional trip into town once a month to get supplies: flour, coffee, batteries, dog food for Jasper. But other than that, I lived completely off the land. I hunted, fished, grew vegetables in the short summer season, and kept bees for honey. It was the life I had always imagined, and I never once regretted it. But then, everything changed. One morning, I was splitting wood out back when a black SUV pulled up to the edge of my property. That was strange enough no one ever came up. This way, there's only one rough dirt trail that even leads to the cabin, and it's hidden unless you know where to look. 2 men in suits stepped out, clean-shaven, polished shoes, holding clipboards like they were here to inspect something. I could already feel my gut tightening. They didn't introduce themselves by name, just said they were representatives from a development company. Told me there was a new project in the works, some kind of luxury ski resort or gated vacation community, and that the company had acquired land rights to the mountain and surrounding area. They said I was trespassing on private land, and that I'd need to vacate the property by the end of the month. I laughed at first. I thought it was some kind of joke, but their faces didn't move. One of them even handed me a document printed with bold legal language and a threatening tone. I didn't understand most of it, but the message was clear. They thought I didn't belong here anymore. I told them they were wrong, that I'd lived here for years, that this was my home. But they shrugged and said it didn't matter. Said I didn't have any official claim to the land because it wasn't registered properly, that some loophole made it technically a noun, and that their company had moved in fast to buy it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat out by the fire with Jasper curled beside me, reading the papers they gave me over and over. Something didn't feel right. How could they just show up one day and say, "Didn't belong here"? I put my blood and sweat into this place. I knew every tree, every creek, every rock on this mountain. I had been here before they even knew this place existed. And deep down, I knew there had to be more to the story. So the next morning, I started digging. Not literally, but legally. I drove into town and went straight to the county office. I asked to see every piece of land documentation they had on the mountain. The clerk raised an eyebrow, but after a while, she brought out a stack of old maps and papers, some dating back nearly a century. I took photos, made copies, and spent hours comparing dates, names, coordinates. And what I found left me stunned, because somewhere buried in those old records was my name. I stared at that old paper like I was seeing a ghost. It was dated almost 20 years ago, a small, nearly forgotten land transfer agreement. The name on it was mine, though barely legible, signed when I was still working a construction job and saving up every penny I had. It hit me like a storm. Back then, I had bought a small plot of wilderness from an old prospector who'd fallen on hard times. He told me it was remote and wild, and I'd liked the sound of that. I had the paper notarized, tucked it away in a storage box, and forgot all about it during the chaos of life. What I didn't realize was that the land I bought wasn't small. That prospector had owned a massive portion of the mountain range, passed down from his grandfather, who had claimed it before there were roads or maps. And when he sold it to me, all of it came with the deal. The document was clear, handwritten, old-fashioned, and legally binding. I couldn't believe it. I didn't just own the cabin. I owned the land all around it. Miles of forest, the creeks, the trails, even the ridge where the developers had planted a survey marker. I went back to the county clerk and showed her what I'd found. She called in a supervisor. They checked, cross-checked, and even pulled the original deed from the archive. It took hours, but eventually, they nodded in agreement. According to their records, the land had never been transferred again, which meant one thing: it was still mine. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I got a visit, not from suits and shiny shoes, but from lawyers. Real sharp ones, the kind with gold pins and tight smiles. They didn't knock, just waited by my fence until I came out. They handed me a thick envelope with official-looking papers and told me they were challenging the ownership. Said their client had made a substantial investment and wouldn't accept a discrepancy in the records. They called my deed outdated and dubious. I told them they could call it whatever they wanted. I wasn't leaving. They warned me that fighting in court would be expensive, that I might lose, that I should consider a settlement and walk away. I just stared at them. I didn't say a word. After they left, I burned the fire hotter that night. Jasper sat beside me like always, calm and loyal. The next few weeks were tense. I'd find tire tracks near the trail, drones buzzing overhead, even a strange man taking photos from the tree line. It felt like I was being watched. They were trying to scare me, but I'd lived through worse. I'd faced snowstorms, wild animals, even hunger some seasons. I wasn't about to be scared off by lawyers or threats. I knew I had to get serious, though, so I drove back into town and found an attorney, an old guy who wore suspenders and had a hunting rifle in his office. He listened to my story, read the papers, and smiled. Said, "You've got them cornered. Let's make some noise." He helped me file a formal claim with the county. We submitted the deed, photos, and every map we could find. We even tracked down the original prospector's family, and his son signed an affidavit confirming the sale. Within a week, the county issued a temporary injunction halting any development until the matter was resolved. The developers weren't happy. Next, they tried to offer me money. Big money. First 6 figures, then 7. Promised to build me a better house, give me free stays at their resort, whatever I wanted. But the thing is, it was never about money. If I'd wanted luxury, I would have stayed in the city. I came here to be free, to live with the mountain, not bulldoze it. I turned them down, and that's when things got uglier. One night, I heard Jasper growling low by the door. I grabbed my rifle and stepped outside. There were fresh boot prints in the snow leading up to the cabin, but no one was there. A tree had been spray painted with red X's. They were sending a message, but so was I. Put up signs at every trailhead. Private property, no trespassing, owner armed. Then I bought trail cams, dozens of them. I hid them across the forest and watched everything. And I waited, because I knew they weren't finished. The weeks that followed were like something out of a bad dream. It was quiet during the day, almost too quiet, but the forest never lies. Jasper would raise his ears at sounds I couldn't hear, and the cameras started catching movement. Not animals, men. Always staying just out of reach, wearing hats, dark clothes, sometimes masks. One time, a drone hovered directly above the cabin, circling as if scanning the rooftop. They were watching me, but I was watching them back. I sent all the footage to my lawyer. He told me not to confront anyone, but I knew better than to wait until they got brave. I reinforced the doors, put floodlights outside. Every night, I kept the fire going, the rifle loaded, and I didn't sleep much. One night, well past midnight, Jasper barked like a wild beast. I jumped up and rushed to the window. The floodlights had kicked on. There were figures, 2 of them standing at the edge of the tree line. They didn't move. just stared. I shouted, warning them off. They turned slowly and vanished into the dark. The next morning, I found one of my trail cams smashed on the ground. They were trying to intimidate me, but fear doesn't work when you've already lost everything before. I wasn't just fighting for my cabin anymore. I was fighting for the memory of why I came here, the years I built this place with my own hands, and for the land itself. This mountain wasn't for sale. Later that week, I went into town to restock supplies. That's when I noticed people looking at me differently. Some nodded, like they respected me. Others whispered. I stopped at the diner, and the waitress, Sue, slid me a note with my coffee. It read, "Watch your back. They're paying folks to keep an eye on you." I folded it and said nothing. But it told me something important. They were trying to use the town now, turning people into tools. But not everyone would betray me. I decided to take things into my own hands. I wrote a detailed letter explaining everything: the old deed, the threats, the bribes, the harassment. I attached photos, maps, legal statements. Then I sent copies to every local newspaper, a few national ones, and even a couple of environmental groups. I figured if they wanted to pressure me in the dark, I'd shine a light so bright they couldn't hide. The first article ran a week later. Man owns entire mountain, fights off corporate developers. It went viral. Suddenly, reporters were calling. Activists were showing up, peaceful ones, who stood with signs near the highway entrance, shouting things like, "Protect the mountain," and "No means no." I didn't ask them to come, but they came anyway. The story had caught fire. That's when the developers backed off, at least for a little while. Their lawyers claimed it was all a misunderstanding, and they were reviewing their plans. But I wasn't fooled. They were regrouping. One evening, I sat on the porch, staring at the sun dipping behind the ridge. Jasper was curled up beside me, and the cold wind carried the smell of pine. The cabin creaked gently, like it was breathing. I thought about my father, who used to tell me, "Land is the only thing that can't run away from you, so treat it like family." That stuck with me. They wanted my land because it was quiet and untouched. They saw profit. I saw purpose. Even though the spotlight helped, it also made me a target. People drove up just to see the mountain man. Some called me a hero, others, a stubborn fool. But I didn't care about their opinion. I cared about the trees, the soil, the stream that cut through the valley. This wasn't just land. It was home. A few days later, a drone dropped a small parcel near the cabin. I thought it was junk, but inside was a single message typed on smooth cardstock: "This isn't over." I looked up at the sky, half expecting another drone to be watching. I held the card in my hand, crushed it, and tossed it into the fire. They weren't done, but neither was I. Winter came early that year. Thick snow blanketed the mountain, and everything slowed down. But the pressure didn't. If anything, it grew colder, not just in temperature, but in tactics. The developers weren't trying to push me physically anymore. They shifted to legal threats, lawsuits, claims that the deed was invalid. They even tried saying I was squatting on land that belonged to the state. Nonsense, but dangerous nonsense. I spent most nights reading through pages of legal jargon, trying to stay 2 steps ahead. My lawyer, Tom, was doing his best, but even he admitted it was like playing chess with shadows. They had teams of people. I had a wood stove, a dog, and a stack of documents older than most of their executives. But I had one more thing they didn't have: history. Started digging deeper. I found old photos, land surveys, handwritten letters from the original owners, proof that my deed wasn't just legal, it was sacred. My grandfather had traded blood and sweat for this mountain. He didn't sign papers. He made promises to the land. That legacy was mine now. I took everything to the county records office, had them officially scanned, copied, entered into digital archives. If they wanted a paper war, I was ready. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, I noticed the trail cam started picking up movement again. But it wasn't men in dark clothes this time, just curious hikers, campers, even a journalist or two, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mountain man who wouldn't sell. And then something unexpected happened. One day, a young man showed up, Clean cut, nervous, probably early 30s. He didn't come with a threat. He came with a folder. He introduced himself as Caleb, one of the newer team members at the development firm. He said he had something to say, not as an employee, but as someone who grew up nearby. He told me he respected what I was doing, that the company never told the full story. They were painting me as a recluse, a hoarder of land. But he knew the truth now, and he was quitting. Said he couldn't work for people who treated nature like something to be mined and paved. Before he left, he handed me the folder. Inside were internal emails, plans, maps of how they wanted to strip the mountain, cut down trees, dig into the hillside, reroute the creek. It made me sick to my stomach. That folder became the final nail in their coffin. I handed it to Tom, who worked it into the defense. We filed for an injunction. Then the environmental groups came back, stronger this time. With the new documents and public support, we made a case that this land wasn't just privately owned, it was environmentally critical. Rare species lived here. Water sources flowed from here. Destroying it would hurt not just me, but the region. The court granted the injunction. The company backed off again, this time with real hesitation. Their image was tarnished, their plans exposed. Their pressure campaign had failed, and just like that, they disappeared. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat on the porch with Jasper, listening to the wind through the trees. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was quiet. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the county. They were officially recognizing the land as a protected private reserve, meaning no future developments could happen without an environmental review. That was my win. Not just for me, but for the mountain. It's funny how people spend their whole lives trying to own things. Cars, houses, land. But they forget something simple. Sometimes, the land owns you. It gets into your blood, into your bones. This mountain raised me. It challenged me. And when the time came, it stood with me. I still live in that same cabin. Still wake up to the same trees, the same creek, the same wind. Jasper's older now, but he still runs ahead on the trails like he owns them. And in a way, maybe he does, because we earned it. Every stone, every pine, every quiet morning. They tried to take it all from me, but they forgot one thing. You can't evict a man from his soul. And this mountain? It's mine.